The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, John.
Yeah, hi, Catherine. Hi, Catherine.
John?
Yeah, hi, Rodrigo.
Are you? I'm having trouble logging on to GoToMeeting for some reason. Are you there?
Yes, I'm on.
I don't know why you won't let me log in, but if I can't log on, I guess I'll just ask Vince to go from one slide to the next whenever it's my turn. Also, there's a terrible echo there. I don't know if someone needs to mute their phone.
Yeah, I don't know if it's me. I don't think it is.
Well,
This is Vince with NTPEP.
Hey, Vince.
Hi, Vince.
Since this is Rodrigo, I'm having trouble logging on to GoToMeeting. So when we get to my slides, would you mind just going from one slide to the next for me? I'll have my presentation here, and I'll let you know when to go from one to the next.
That works.
Thank you. For some reason, it's asking me for a password, which it's never done before.
Is Catherine there?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Okay. Kathy, if you want to start.
Sure. This is Catherine Molesky with AASHTO. I am the program manager for the National Transportation Product Evaluation Program. And we certainly appreciate all of you calling in this afternoon to learn more about the Geosynthetics program for NTPEP. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what will be discussed during today's presentation, and also give you an overview of the NTPEP program and what it consists of, and then we will move on to our next presenter. So along with myself presenting today is John Schuler, who is the chair of the Geosynthetics Technical Committee, and he works for Virginia DOT. His vice chair is Rodrigo Herrera, and he is the he works with Florida DOT. And we've got Scott Hidden presenting from North Carolina, and then Doug Brown, industry representative with Tensar. You can advance to the next slide if you want, Ben. So today's webinar, the goal of this webinar is to help all the state DOTs make the most out of this program when it refers to their approvals of these products. We want to make sure that we are ensuring quality products out on our highways and any other type of DOT projects related to using the specific type of product. We want to make sure that the duplication of efforts are being reduced by using this program. We also want to reduce expenses to the DOTs and industry for the duplication of testing being done. So to cover the outline for this presentation, I will discuss the NTPEP mission and organization. Next, we will talk about how the NTPEP Geosynthetics program helps the DOTs fulfill their quality assurance requirements. Also, how this program helps and benefits industry from participating in the program. The specific details on the product evaluation and audits themselves. And then we'll also go through some examples of state use of the program and tips on working with NTPEP to incorporate NTPEP into your acceptance programs that you may already have in place. So the National Transportation Product Evaluation Program is a technical service that was established back in 1994, used to report to the Standing Committee on Highways, and now due to the recent restructure of AASHTO, now this technical service program reports to the Highways and Streets Council. We combine both the professional and physical resources of the AASHTO member departments to evaluate materials, products, and devices of common interest for use in highway and bridge construction. And the primary goal of this program is to provide cost-effective and independent evaluations and manufacturing audits for the state DOT. This program does not evaluate new products being introduced to industry for the first time. We don't act as a research avenue for industry members to use. There is a different technical service program through AASHTO, which is APEL, which is we work hand in hand with them. NTPEP does not pass or fail products. Ultimately, that is up to the state to develop and determine pass and fail criteria. NTPEP is only responsible for reporting the data of the audit and the evaluation to the states, and then they can certainly use it at their will. We do not replace the quality assurance activities of state DOTs or manufacturers. Anything that NTPEP requires within the work plan does not supersede what a state DOT may already have in place. And if additional testing is required by a state DOT, the manufacturer does need to follow that requirement as well. They cannot use the excuse that they've been evaluated through NTPEP and they're good to go. A state may want additional testing of any type, and the manufacturer is responsible for going through with that additional testing in order for their product to be used within that state. So in summary, NTPEP simplifies the product evaluation process for consistency and required quality assurance tests. We make it more cost effective for both the manufacturers and the state DOTs. We reduce the duplication of efforts by the state DOTs, and we serve as a one-stop shop for manufacturers of engineered products, meaning that each manufacturer that wants to participate in this program does not have to go to all 50 different states in order to have their product evaluated within that state. They come to the NTPEP website, submit their application, and then that data from both the evaluation and the audit gets distributed in DataMine, and then all states have access to that data. So it acts as a uniform one-stop shop to both the states and all the manufacturers participating. The structure of NTPEP, we have product-specific technical committees with various products being included in each of these technical committees. The technical committees are made up of state DOT members and industry representatives. Each state gets to have one voting member to guide NTPEP's mission. The NTPEP audits and evaluation reports serve as tools available free of charge to every state's transportation agency. AASHTO NTPEP does not dictate how and what data to use or set as specifications for product approval or qualification. This is a decision and choice made within each state DOT. So as I had mentioned, the transportation products and materials manufacturers submit their products to be evaluated. That's step one of this process. And then once the evaluation takes place or the audit takes place, the evaluation results become available to the registered DOT members on our DataMine website, data.ntpep.org. The industry representatives, since this is a partnership, NTPEP does serve as a partnership between industry and state DOT members. We ask industry representatives, they're invited to encourage to submit ideas, suggestions for improvement, and general feedback to each of the programs. Their feedback does get taken into consideration within each of the technical committees, and that's how revisions and amendments are made to the current work plans in which the work plans are followed to carry out the evaluations and the audits. So here's a look at the DataMine website, data.ntpep.org. It does serve as the data repository for all evaluation and audit results. It's accessible to all individuals with a valid state DOT email. So if you are not registered, if you've never gone onto the data.ntpep.org website, you can go to the section where it's very simple to register, to set up an account on there. We would approve your user account, and then you would be able to access all different types of data on there. There's also under help, you'll find several videos that can help you navigate throughout the website. It is pretty comprehensive, but we've made it so that it is as user-friendly as possible. So all the products that we are talking about, all the evaluations, all the audits are in accordance with AASHTO and ESPN specifications that are under each of the work plans. When standards do not exist, the technical committees convene and establish test protocols that are then sent through ballot to make sure that we have the consensus of the majority of all 50 states agreeing to what type of standard the technical committee members did come up with. The testing service fees are assessed to industry to cover the actual costs for field and lab testing of products. All costs associated with any type of audit or evaluation are borne by the manufacturer. And contributions from each of the AASHTO members and apportionment of the industry fees is what helps sustain NTPEP as a whole. So currently NTPEP does have 21 different technical committees. 17 of these committees involve product evaluations, while 8 of the technical committees contain product evaluations and audits. One of these examples, of course, what we're focusing on today is geosynthetics. AASHTO's current technical service annual contribution for NTPEP is $17,000 from each state. This year, I believe we've received 46 state contributions, which is definitely in the range where we usually get between 45 and 48 contributions. But we've had one state attribute what value they get out of NTPEP by giving AASHTO this $17,000 voluntary contribution, and in turn they say that they get over $2 million worth of data that they get from this program just by going onto DataMine, accessing this data. Less evaluations that they have to conduct in their lab, less audits that they have to do. So it's definitely a win-win for both industry and the state.
Okay, well, thank you, Catherine. So now I'm going to present the next section of slides. My name is John Schuler. I'm with the Virginia DOT and currently the chair of the Geosynthetics Committee at NTPEP. And Catherine, can I ask you, am I coming in okay? Do I sound all right?
Yep, you sound good. Thanks,
Okay.
John.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, Catherine gave us a great overview of the NTPEP program, and Vince is also on this webinar. And Catherine and Vince are the two liaisons for our committee to NTPEP, and they do a lot of the behind-the-scenes work to keep this framework going. And this committee is made up of DOT members and industry members, and then we're driving the work plan and changes to it, as Catherine mentioned. Well, this set of slides, I'm going to talk about how DOTs do quality assurance, not just for geosynthetics, but for everything, all products that go into the transportation systems, and what we're required to do, but how it impacts the geosynthetics program. So the Code of Federal Regulations, 23 CFR Part 637, has a section called Quality Assurance Procedures for Construction. And then the FHWA put out a tech advisory, T61 20.3, which amplifies on that CFR section. So this is a high-level document regulation, but it's in the CFR because the DOTs all get money from the federal government to build roads and bridges, and so we follow this as far as how we do quality assurance. And it's a very nicely laid out program that they have. And on this slide, you'll see there are 7 bullet points. And this is what quality assurance consists of as we have to do it. You have contractor, or in this case, manufacturer quality control, agency acceptance, independent assurance, or IA, dispute resolution, personnel qualification, laboratory accreditation and qualification, and finally something called verification, sampling, and testing, or VST. And I'm going to go over these in the next few slides. Okay, so the first bullet point is QC, quality control data. We use the term a lot, QA/QC, and this tells us that's really not proper. Quality assurance is all of these items combined. Quality control is one part of it. FHWA has a standard definition here, but essentially quality control data is what the manufacturer generates himself to keep his own processes in control. So he's generating typically a lot of data, and it's for his own purposes, for just to keep his product quality up. Now, do the geosynthetic manufacturers, does the program have this data? Yes. We call these MARVs. So the MARV values are developed from all this quality control data that the manufacturers are collecting as they produce their product. And we have, MARV is a somewhat poorly understood concept by a lot of people outside of the field, but this is where we come up with MARV value. It's all contractor or manufacturer quality control data. Now, this is a good thing to have all this data, and in our acceptance decisions, we want to be able to make use of this data. And so we have it, it's good data, but we have to make sure that it's not biased. And that's what the next slide is going to show. Okay, so independent assurance, or IA, this is another somewhat poorly understood concept. So the CFR defines it as activities are an unbiased and independent evaluation of the sampling and testing procedures. So the manufacturer has all this quality control data he's collecting. But let's say even on something as simple as mass per area test, if his scale is out of calibration and always reading high, we will be accepting that data and nobody would ever know that there's a bias in there. The scale is out of calibration. The only way to detect if issues like this with equipment and maybe the technician's ability to do the test properly is with an independent assurance program. IA only checks equipment and procedures. It is the DOT responsibility. It can be done by a third party. It is not done for spec compliance. That's a big misconception. The tip-off that you are doing independent assurance is when you take a split sample. The reason for that is to reduce variability in the testing procedures, because one sample goes to one lab, the other sample goes to another lab. And the idea is both labs should get the same result within a test tolerance. If they don't, if the results are very different, it doesn't matter whether both results pass, both fail, which you might be expecting the result to be. One fails, one passes. That's all a bad IA result. You want the two tests to be very close in result. That shows you that you can have confidence that all of that quality control data the manufacturer is generating is good data. His technicians are doing the tests right. His equipment is calibrated. Everything's good. If you find a difference, you need to investigate that. Okay, but IA is not for spec compliance or acceptance. You wouldn't find an IA result that differs and say, therefore, I'm going to reject the product. Now, this is an important part of QA, and NTPEP, just like it covers QC by coming up with the MAR values, NTPEP also covers IA, because in the annual audits we do, split samples of product are taken and the IA results are run. This is obviously at a very reduced frequency over quality control tests, but this is typical in the way IA should work. So this is something that would really be difficult and not impossible for an individual state to do, but NTPEP has it covered. Okay, verification sampling and testing, or VST. This is performed to validate the quality of the product. So this is your spec compliance check. Any sample at any time will do for VST. You do not need split samples. The DOT, it's up to them to do VST. These samples are supposed to be independent of QC samples, should not be split, and there's no frequency specified. So you can take them, sample the fabric or grid from your local supplier, from his warehouse, from off the project site, anywhere you want, anytime. And you can check that fabric for spec compliance to your DOT spec. So that's up to the DOT, and we all have control over that. But that's another part that we should be doing for quality assurance. Okay, then we have these concepts of dispute resolution, personnel qualification, lab accreditation and qualification. These are all covered in the Geosynthetics work plan. The standard NTPEP work plan across all the committees, in fact, covers these in standard language, so we have all of that done. The only thing in the QA program left is agency acceptance. And this is obviously up to the DOTs. We define this in our specifications and our approved list. And FHWA has a standard definition for agency acceptance, but this is obvious. So we get to set our own acceptance criteria. NTPEP does not do that. As Catherine said, they do not approve products. They do not say what passes and fails. They collect the data, make it available to the DOTs, and we apply against our own specs and see what passes and fails. So in summary, what I wanted to show with these sets of slides is what a comprehensive quality assurance program for geosynthetics is supposed to cover, and how the NTPEP program basically covers all of this for you. There's very little left for an individual DOT to do, so this is a huge benefit of the NTPEP program. And Doug, are you on the call?
You were breaking up, John. Who were you calling?
Is Doug Brown on the call?
This is Vince with NTPEP. Looks like Doug was not able to make it to this session. You or Rodrigo would like to touch on these two slides.
Okay, Rodrigo, do you want to handle this?
Sure, and unfortunately, I was never able to log on to the GoToWebinar, so I guess we're going to my slides now. Vince, is that the case?
Next up, after Doug's slides, is John's slides at slide 20. John, would you like me to move forward to your presentation?
Okay, no, that's okay. Why don't I take these two slides on NTPEP and industry, the benefit to industry? So it's what you have on the screen now. And this is to show that it's not just a one-way street. We have the DOT involvement and the industry involvement, and it's a real partnership. And we'll touch on this throughout the rest of the webinar. But we have learned from each other, and it's been a great partnership, and we are continuing to learn from each other, and we work with each other. The work plan is a cooperative effort, and it's worked out very well to date. So the history of this increased participation, in the late 2000s, several DOTs were considering banning or severely restricting some geosynthetic products because of quality concerns. And industry really wanted to avoid 50 different specifications among the 50 different DOTs. So they worked with the NTPEP committee through their GMA, the Geosynthetic Manufacturers Association, to help draft this current work plan that we have. The GMA represents over 1,500 companies worldwide, and their goal is to promote consistent and accurate information on geosynthetics. It is significant that GMA endorses the NTPEP Geosynthetics program. Any manufacturer can participate. You do not have to be a GMA member. Compliant manufacturers know they're on a level playing field. It avoids duplication of product categories by following M288, and there is a reduced paperwork burden on the industry with the product marking and labeling. So we've been in partnership with industry for many years now in this committee with significant participation, and neither one of us would want to make changes to the work plan without running it by everybody. Because obviously on the DOT side, what industry wants sometimes might not be what we want from our perspective as owners. And a lot of times what the DOTs want, industry will tell us it's either prohibitively expensive or it doesn't make sense for manufacturing processes or things like this, things that we would never know on our own. So it is endorsed by the industry, and we're, I want to say we're a happy family working together on this program. Okay, the next section of slides I want to talk about are some of the details on the product evaluation and the audit programs. So the NTPEP Geosynthetics program has been around since at least the 1990s, and it's undergone many changes, especially in more recent years. And there's a lot of states and perhaps other people out there that may not be aware of the vast improvements that we've made to the program recently. And the big thing is the audit program. We've always been a product evaluation program since the 90s, but the geotextile side of the program has had an audit program going for about 6 years or so. And what we call the REGEO or REGEO side of the program, which is for grids and high strength fabrics, has also started an audit program, a trial audit program as of this year. Okay, so since the 90s, NTPEP has performed product evaluation of M288 geosynthetic products for the tests required by M288. These were always done on a 3-year cycle, and they still are. Significant, NTPEP still does this. This is what's called product evaluation. All of the results on these tests are in DataMine. That's the online database that Catherine had mentioned. All state DOT members have access to this, and in fact, they have a higher level of access than the general public. Okay, the problem was though, doing product evaluation only was insufficient for DOTs to rely on for quality assurance. And we saw that clearly when we looked at all the quality assurance requirements required by the CFR. In fact, if you remember, you still look at those reports on product evaluation, it says right on the cover of the opening page, do not use this for quality assurance, because it was recognized it was not enough for that. But now that NTPEP performs annual audits of manufacturers, we have all the information we need for a good quality assurance program to really implement the quality assurance and make use of both product evaluation and audit information. So we have, again, the Geosynthetics Committee has two programs within it. One is the geotextiles that has been around for a long time and deals with the standard M288 products. And the newer program is REGEO or REGEO. It's kind of like tomato versus tomato, but people say either. And this is for geogrids and high strength fabrics. And the reason we have both of them is because the state DOTs wanted this REGEO program. They decided it was important for them to have. And also industry, participated in it, also desired to have it. So here are the benefits of an audit program. It verifies both hands-on and eyes-on the processes and records on an annual basis of the facilities, participating facilities, whether manufacturers or, as we'll see, private labelers and converting facilities. So this closes a lot of the gaps, basically all of them, in just that 3-year product check. It does allow all the required elements of the DOT's QA program to be satisfied. And significantly, it's resulted in much better understanding between the industry and the DOTs. And as an example, for the first time ever, MARV values are now being independently verified by the audit program. So M288 came out, I think, before the year 2000, but nobody had ever independently checked a MARV until 2 years ago when our audit program started doing that. And we have the written procedure of how a MARV is calculated and what goes into it and what we're looking for. We recently adopted the ASTM D35 definition of MARV, which we now have, and the M288 definition is still a little bit different. But importantly, this MARV checking could not be done at a state level. It would have been impossible for a state alone to do this. But now, through this collaborative effort, also participated in by industry, we have more confidence than ever that we can rely on the MARV values. And I don't want to imply that there was any suspicion that we couldn't, but there was just a lot of confusion among the DOTs about what these were, how they were applied, and now we should all know it's a very transparent, level playing field. Okay, so the product evaluation allows you to compare test results against your own state specs, and the audit ensures the manufacturer is following the NTPEP Geosynthetics work plan or the REGEO plan. And that's what they're audited to. Are they following the work plan? And this gives us confidence that the results are accurate and consistent. And the audit also allows for continuous improvement of the program as we go out and make new findings of what's working better and what's not. So both of these elements, product evaluation and auditing, are necessary for a valid QA program. Okay, one of the things we found and why it took a while to get the audit program going is because of the level of sophistication and maturity of the geosynthetics industry, there's a very interrelated web between source manufacturers of product and then what we call private labelers, and what we found out through this program, a new category that we now call converters. So understanding the nature of this industry in this regard to how products are marketed essentially has been an enormous benefit of the audit program. We understand this now. We've written the work plan around it. Data mine, the online data warehouse revolves around it. And this gives us a lot of confidence in the traceability of all the products that are in the system. And because of what we found here, the work plan requires product marking and labeling, certainly on the geotextile side. This has been another enormous stride to ensure quality. So every piece of fabric that's in the geotextiles NTPEP program has a product code, or I should say a facility code, marked every 15 feet on that piece of fabric. So this allows complete traceability back to the source manufacturer. And I won't go into too much detail on these different categories of facilities, but essentially a private labeler may not relabel or repackage product. They must get it pre-printed and pre-labeled with whatever information they want to sell it under their name from the source manufacturer. This other category of converter facilities, they may relabel and repackage, but as a consequence, they are required by our work plan to do some additional quality assurance testing. So we want the full traceability in line, and we want to make sure what they're doing to convert the product does not change the material properties. Okay, finally, I'll say there's a lot of behind the scenes work at both AASHTO and among what we call the lead states. Now, if you're a user DOT who's making use of this data in the audit program, this is completely transparent to you, so it requires no work. But New York is the lead state for the geotextile side, and they review hundreds of products annually. Florida is the lead state for the REGEO side, and they're reviewing fewer reports, but these are very extensive, typically about 100 pages each. Currently, TRI Labs is the testing and auditing company. Now, these auditing firms and testing firms, they are awarded on a periodic basis by NTPEP based on open bid and qualification. So TRI has been doing the auditing and testing for our program. And what I want to say here is once the tests are run and complete, or the audit is complete, what happens is the testing firm, the auditing firm, reviews their findings and the data. The manufacturer is allowed to review the data and comment on it and for release. AASHTO NTPEP staff reviews the data, and the lead state is reviewing the data. So that's 4 levels of review, at least, that all the data goes through before being released in data mine for consumption by the state or the public. So it's an enormous level of review that goes on with all the data and audit results. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rodrigo Herrera, our Florida lead state, to talk about the REGEO program.
Thank you, John. This is Rodrigo. And Vince, since I can't see what you have on the screen, please let me know if I'm talking about something that's not on the slides. But what I have on my screen is the very first slide with the REGEO scope title. All right, so I think because John did an excellent job at covering all of these details that go into the QA and QC program, as we typically refer to it, I'll try and keep my section fairly short. But I've been in charge of reviewing all of these REGEO submittals for the program, and what we've tried to do in this arm of the NTPEP program is to take care of everything that is related as far as geosynthetics in terms of reinforcement for the typical products that we address, such as mechanically stabilized walls or reinforced slopes or reinforced fields over soft ground. And so that's the focus of the REGEO portion of our technical committee. Next slide. All right, so the two main functions of our REGEO program are both the audits, of course, and those are yearly audits that are performed, as well as the testing. And that testing comes in two sequences. One that we call the qualification portion of testing, and that one, starting with the 2018 work program, will be on a 9-year cycle, and we're keeping the quality assurance level testing, which is slightly less stringent than the qualification portion. That one is still going to take place at a 3-year cycle. Next slide. So our annual audits, and the REGEO program is fairly new, particularly the audit portion of it. But we have already started this annual auditing of vendors, and we're currently planning on continuing that for all of the items that you see up on your screen. So we're covering, obviously, source manufacturers. We're also covering private label companies. And John already went into the details of that. And that's whenever we have a company that makes no changes whatsoever to the product, even the label for the new company comes from the source manufacturer. And then we have converter companies as well. Next slide. All right, so I'm not going to read to you everything you have on the screen. You can do that yourself when you get the PDFs. But in essence, this is the very key for the NTPEP program, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to reinforcement geosynthetics. It's the annual audit that really brings a lot of value to the program. This is something that, like John pointed out before, we would not be doing on our own at the state level. We could not do it. We simply don't have enough resources to do that. And auditing every single source manufacturer and private label company is something that by default you get out of the NTPEP program, and is a huge advantage over what we would have otherwise. So next slide, and similar, it's just a summary of what we cover in the audit. So, and you can read that later on when you get the PDF. So we can go to the next slide. And Vince, we should have the slide up on the screen that has that equation on it. So beyond the auditing program, we have obviously some laboratory testing that is involved with NTPEP. And so what you would get out of the REGEO portion of the technical committee are essentially 3 values that you would be looking for in our final reports when we're done with the laboratory testing. And those are the reduction factors for creep and installation damage and durability that we require to go from an ultimate value to a nominal type resistance. And so those are provided in every REGEO report. Next slide. So the typical process that we follow is that depending on the type of testing that is required at the time, whether it's qualification or quality assurance, we will look in our work plan, which is the document on the far left on your screen. We will look at the work plan to see what type of testing is required for that level of qualification. And then we would go to the standard protocols that are included in designation R69, AASHTO designation R69, which has the protocol for testing. And then we would end up with a NTPEP report that is posted up on the website for your use. Next slide. So the benefits to the states. If I had to summarize everything that's up on your screen now, it would come down to the audit, right? It's that yearly verification of consistency in quality control that is being performed by manufacturers that is the key to the program, and is something that brings an enormous amount of value that is not monetary, but it gives us peace of mind that not only did we attempt to make sure that there was quality in the program, or in the product rather, once, but it's done on a yearly basis, and that's a lot more than most states would be doing otherwise. Next slide. As far as benefits to the manufacturers, of course, it is of great benefit because there's a single source for testing, and so once your product has been tested by NTPEP, then you have a document that you can provide any state DOT when you're applying for inclusion into a qualified products list or an approved products list. Next slide. So as far as, and this is mostly for the states, as far as requiring NTPEP participation in your documents, what we've seen states do has taken one of 2 roads. Some have made it a requirement for inclusion in the approved or qualified product list itself. So if you're applying for APL, then you would have to show that your product has been tested through NTPEP. Another approach has been to make it part of the specifications, where by spec the state would say, in order to apply to APL, in order to use these products in our projects, you have to be participating with NTPEP, and it has to have been a product that's been tested by NTPEP, and the facility that is producing it has to have been successfully audited by the NTPEP group. And by the way, I'm actually very happy to say that we have finally made the decision to make it mandatory in Florida for reinforcement geosynthetics to be part of the NTPEP program. And so I'll be working on that language later on this week. Next slide. So to close it up, this is just an example of just how much you can get out of participation with NTPEP. Over 90% of the testing required for inclusion into our APL in Florida are values that you can get out of the NTPEP group. And so it is definitely something that is of great benefit to both the state and vendors. And of course, there are additional tests that are required by most states for reinforcement type geosynthetics, like pull out and direct shear. And those are also optional tests that you can take care of when you participate with NTPEP. So it's certainly of great benefit to both parties. And that's all I have today. Thank you, Vince.
Yeah, thank you, Rodrigo. This is John, and I'm going to go over the next few slides on what Rodrigo was talking about on the RAGEO program, how DOTs can implement this program. So we want as many states as possible to make use of the program. That's good because we believe it's a very good quality assurance program, and also it helps the industry where rather than having to deal with different state requirements, it gives them a more level playing field also. So essentially all it requires, as Rodrigo alluded to, was just we have to change our specifications to require two things: product evaluation and facility audit, whether it's manufacturer, private labor, or converter, to be what we call compliant with the program. That means you've done well in your audit. Then you're able to implement as complete an approved list or a QPL list as you would like. Okay. But it does require somebody to take the lead on revising the spec and perhaps your approved list then. Okay, some other things. Once you implement the spec change and you are using NTPEP, you will need to become familiar with DataMine, that online data storage warehouse. Now this is easier than ever. DataMine has gone through at least 3 major revisions. It's more user-friendly than it's ever been. It takes a little bit of getting used to, like anything, but it's fine to use. And it requires for state people your same AASHTO login that you would use, your same username and password. If you're doing ballots through AASHTO or you're participating in those TC3 online training webinars, same login information. You will need to communicate changes to your suppliers in advance and provide them some time to adapt to get into the program. So when we started this in Virginia, we started talking about the change 2 years before we actually did it. But it caught nobody by surprise and gave everybody time to get into the program. Of course, like Rodrigo said, you may need to maintain some minor extra requirements for your state. There might be a test or two that AASHTO NTPEP doesn't do. But the beauty of the program is if you, as a DOT person, want to get involved in the committee, you can request changes to the work plan. And if we find enough states are doing a test that's not in there, we can put it in there. You may need to work with your local suppliers to ensure that last step of quality product delivery. So NTPEP ensures quality from raw material to the source manufacturer, all the way through private labelers and converters. And then the product gets delivered to local suppliers. And there's not much more required other than storage, delivery, and making sure that they can categorize the product correctly by NTPEP and non-NTPEP material, make sure the right stuff gets delivered to the right job. But that would be up to you to work with your local suppliers like that. And you definitely should see an increase in quality and supplier satisfaction. That's what we saw in our state. The suppliers are doing less paperwork. We're doing less paperwork. We have more confidence in the quality of the products and everything. So here's an example from Virginia DOT. For many years, we've had an existing geosynthetic spec in our road and bridge specifications. And we made some minor changes, some rewrites, where we actually reference NTPEP work plans in our spec. And this one for silt fence, which is something that the geosynthetics plan covers only part of, but there's a slurry test that RDEQ requires us to do, and it's in another NTPEP committee, so we reference that. And here's how we wrote our spec, boilerplate language, to make sure that all of our suppliers know that they have to supply NTPEP products. And we just have a short paragraph here describing that. And then what I have circled in red, this is how we cover the verification, sampling, testing requirement of EDOP. We just say we reserve the right to test product at any time from the project site or a facility, and we test it for compliance with spec requirements. Failure may result in a product being rejected or removed from the approved list. And we have a little bit more about how we accept MARs and that type of thing. But that's all it takes, a few paragraphs in the spec. And here's an example of what our approved list looks like, and we've actually updated this recently. But once we went to NTPEP, that was the first time that we were ever able to make an approved list for geosynthetics that listed individual products and expiration dates. We were requiring the vendors to be specifically listed. We've stopped that, which has made things a lot easier. They still have to be approved suppliers in Virginia. One of the significant things it's helped us with was, well, one, transparency. We have an approved list now with products on it. Any contractor can see what's on there. And before we went to NTPEP, we were testing the material ourselves in our own lab. So we don't do that anymore. We got rid of all fabric testing at the DOT. So that helps us out, but also is a big paperwork exercise because we would test it based on a lot basis. So the local suppliers would tell us when they had a lot. We would go out, take a sample, bring it back, test it. If it passed, we would go out and tag their rolls. And a lot covered so many hundreds of thousands of square feet. Well, how did you know when a lot was used up? They had to keep track of that, and we had to get the paperwork on that. So as you can imagine, that was a lot of paperwork and tracking that we no longer have to do because the NTPEP program is supplying the traceability. And then this is just a paragraph we have up front on our approved list, just to be as transparent as we can. Let anybody who wants to get on the list know what's required. So you see we talked about requiring NTPEP evaluation, compliance, and for those extra tests that are not in the program, they have to be done by a certified lab. And then even here you see at the bottom of the silk fence list, for example, we list those extra tests that are required. And here's an example from New Hampshire DOT. They revised their spec, so it includes all necessary language in the spec for product evaluation and, again, manufacturer compliance. That is the audit program. And this is all it takes, a short paragraph. And here's an example of what their QPL, their qualified product list or approved list looks like. And they have a nice succinct list here. So they list it by manufacturer and product. They also have an expiration date, which is available due to the NTPEP program. And then they list the classes of M288 category that the product is approved for. And so that's a nice succinct list there. But they're able to do this through their the NTPEP participation. And here's an example from Arkansas DOT. And this was formerly what their spec said. They've been making use of NTPEP for a long time, but just for product evaluation. So this short paragraph here that you see was in their spec, and it required products to be evaluated through NTPEP. But if we look at the next slide, you'll see how they were able to just go ahead and make the change simply. When the audit program came along, they updated their spec. And what we have circled in red here, they now say that the geotextile fabric must be supplied to the Department of PPL, and where they have in there the fabric shall comply with 288. The manufacturer supplier must participate in the program also. So they've got both of those facets covered. And then the second circle in red here, you'll see this is another extra requirement. As the acceptance agency, you can make your own requirements. So Arkansas wants a sample of every fabric so they can see clearly what that facility code is that's printed on the fabric before they put it on their QPL or approved list. Okay, so the point of that was to show some examples of how easy it is to get NTPEP Geosynthetics program implemented into your state's specifications and approved list. Just a little bit of work up front, and somebody will have to gain familiarity with data mine if they don't have it, but that's not a high hurdle by any means. And so what I'll do now is turn the next set of the presentation over to Scott Hidden from North Carolina DOT to talk about how they've implemented very well the REGEO side of the program.
Thank you, John. John gave us a few examples of how several DOTs have implemented the NTPEP GSX program in their state. In North Carolina, we have fully incorporated the GSX program into the NCDOT Geosynthetics approvals. This flowchart shows how the GTX work plan forms the basis for our geotextile approved product list, or our APL, and also how the REGEO work plan forms the basis for what we call the GeoGrid evaluation program. While the REGEO program encompasses high-strength geotextiles, geogrids, and geostrips, our program currently only includes geogrids. That's because geotextiles with the REGEO reports have not been submitted because NCDOT does not use high-strength geotextiles for embassy walls and reinforced soil slopes. And we've not received any geostrips with REGEO reports but we are expecting our first one soon, and once we do, we'll have to revise our GeoGrid evaluation program to include geostrips in the near future. The REGEO work plan has an optional pull-out and direct shear testing component, as Rodrigo had mentioned. However, currently NCDOT has only received vendor-supplied data for pull-out and direct shear. And one thing that we've seen is that we can really see the difference in the data quality between the NTPEP data and the vendor data. Some of the vendor data submitted to us is very old, or maybe only a small number of samples or products were tested. We've seen testing done by questionable laboratories, or too few, or the wrong types of soil used for the testing. So there's a real value in the quality of data that we get from the NTPEP program. Next slide, please. So to begin, I'll explain how NCDOT uses the GTX program. Geotextiles are listed on the NCDOT APL for various geotextile types based on the standard specs and provisions. And in order to be listed on our APL, you have to meet 3 requirements. The first thing is prime manufacturers and private labelers and converters shall maintain a current NTPEP audit status of compliant. So they have to participate in the audit program. The products shall meet or exceed NCDOT geotextile material property requirements based on the NTPEP data. And since all approval is based on NTPEP data, there is no need to review technical data sheets or vendor test data for geotextiles. All we need to do is check it against the NTPEP data. And the products shall have a current data in the NTPEP data mine. So data mine not only confirms that the data is current, but also allows our personnel to check the numbers when approving the geotextiles for the APL. It's a fairly simple process, straightforward to get added to the NCDOT APL with the NTPEP data and from the NTPEP data mine. Geotextiles are identified in the field by NTPEP marking or labeling. This has been a huge benefit to the field personnel. Before this, our field people used to have to take technical data sheets and compare those technical data sheets to the spec. Now with this program, they don't have to do that anymore. They just need to check that the geotextiles are marked with the product name, and it allows the inspectors to identify the products in the field and match them to the APL. And M&T is contacted if geotextiles are not marked or labeled with NTPEP listed. This is important because situations can arise where geotextiles are not marked with the product name. For example, private labelers do not mark their products with the product name. But all geosynthetics from a manufacturer or private label with a current NTPEP audit status of compliant are marked or labeled with NTPEP listed. So if NTPEP listed is not there, inspectors are instructed to call M&T. It is also possible that the same product could be manufactured at more than one plant. And if one plant is audited and the other is not, some products would be marked with and labeled with NTPEP listed and other products would not. This has happened recently for a product manufactured at a plant overseas that has been audited. The same product is also manufactured at a fairly new plant in the U.S. that has not been audited. So the NTPEP listed stamping is a very important part of the auditing program and the marking program. Next slide. So the NCDOT geotextile material requirements are shown here, and this is part of our geosynthetic specifications. One of the benefits of using an APL is field personnel do not need to figure out if the geotextiles meet AASHTO. All they need to know is if the geotextile is on the APL. And if it is, then they know that the geotextile meets AASHTO based on the NTPEP data. All of the things that are circled here in red are based on the AASHTO M288 and data that comes from the NTPEP program. Next slide. Now I'll explain how NCDOT uses the RE-GEO program. GeoGrids are evaluated for 3 different design lives, 3-year, 75-year, and 100-year, and 3 different borrow types or material types, borrow, fine, and coarse aggregate. The GeoGrids are evaluated because unlike geotextiles, we're not trying to approve grids for specific properties. Instead, we are trying to establish approved properties for the grids. Reduction factors and short and long-term design strengths are based on NTPEP RE-GEO evaluations. Optional test data may be submitted for pull-out resistance and direct shear. If a vendor does not submit optional pull-out or direct shear data, or the data is too old, then they are required to use the AASHTO default of 0.67 for the coefficient of interaction and the coefficient of direct sliding. A table of design values is approved for each GeoGrid series submitted. The real benefit of the GeoGrid evaluation program is it makes it clear up front what the approved GeoGrid properties are, and they are sound because they are based on NTPEP data. This prevents disagreements later about GeoGrid properties for design. Next slide. This is the table of GeoGrid properties to be completed for the NCDOT GeoGrid evaluation program. Each line is a product in a series. Properties across the top row are not unique to soil type. The rest of the values are different depending on the soil type, so they are separated out for the 3 different soil types. Next slide. This is a generic example table of properties for, say, something like GeoGrid XYZ with a borrow soil type. You can see the highlighted numbers that come from NTPEP data. Total reduction factors and short and long-term design strengths are then calculated based on the NTPEP data, and the formula that Rodrigo gave earlier is how the numbers are calculated. So in this example, grid XYZ in borrow is approved in the machine direction for a short-term 3-year design strength of 3,267 pounds per foot. So if we have a temporary wall constructed with borrow that requires a strength of, say, 3,500 pounds per foot, this grid would not work. Next slide. So how does NCDOT GeoGrid evaluation program get used? The GeoGrid evaluation program gets used in our MSC wall approval program, our standard reinforced soil slope designs, and our standard temporary wall designs. For example, an LTDS table such as shown above for NCDOT standard RSS with high groundwater where class 1 material represents borrow. So that's the table that's in the plans. And a 1.5 to 1 reinforced soil slope with a high groundwater that is 20 foot tall and constructed with borrow requires a grid with a long-term 75-year design strength of 900 pounds per foot. All that needs to be done is look through the approved GeoGrids from the GeoGrid evaluation program to find a grid for a 75-year design strength with borrow of at least 900 pounds per foot. And once again, that number is based on the NTPEP program and the NTPEP testing.
Okay, well, thank you, Rodrigo and Scott and Catherine. We're here to take questions if anybody has any from the audience or on the chat room. Catherine, if there are any, I would ask you to moderate those. But here's our contact information. Any of us would welcome questions. The committee chair, Rodrigo, vice chair, and Catherine at NTPEP. Any of us would welcome questions. If anybody has questions about the program, whatever part it may be. I would want to thank everybody for logging in today, for being a part of this webinar. We hope it was informative. We did get this webinar back in early October of last year, and we wanted to do it again. We should have this recorded, and we'll get word out on where that recording is so people can log into that after the fact too. And I want to put a plug in that we have the annual AASHTO NTPEP meeting coming up in April, as we do most every year. And this year it is in Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia. If anybody's interested in attending that, who might not usually be there. And the Geosynthetic Committee will meet on Monday of that week. It's Monday, April 23rd. The conference runs the 22nd to the 26th. Okay, Catherine, did you have anything to add?
No, John, this is Catherine. I don't have anything to add. I'm not sure, Vince, if you see any questions in the chat box. I don't see any on my end, but I can't see the full screen, so I'm not sure if any questions came through.
No questions have come through, and I've checked the chat session as well. It is clear.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm fine with ending the webinar. Again, I want to thank everybody, the participants, thank you for your time, and the audience, thank you for attending.
Thank you, John. Talk to you all soon.